Yokman, would you please continue with your questions, and then it's Paul's turn. Well, I'll wait for the second round. Thank you. Alan? And then Kenneth, Alan, and Yokman. Paul? Well, previously, Ms. Christine Loh, the Undersecretary, answered one question about the overall understanding of the whole issue and whether or not we have any hope. Whether or not our motherland is our burden or our benefactor, Hong Kong cannot take care of itself independently. So, how far should Hong Kong move before the other pollutants won't pollute our ambient environment? Well, I'll defer to my colleague later for supplementary details. Now, for this issue, it's not a question of moving Hong Kong farther away, because that's impossible. The question is, how far should Hong Kong be relocated or moved before we can't be affected by our neighbors? Well, other jurisdictions face the same problem, but we cannot be relocated. Now, what are our neighbors doing? Our neighbor is also reducing emission. It has done a great deal of homework. Of course, we're looking ahead, so everybody has to reduce emission. So I really don't know how to answer your question. Is it better to move farther away? Yes, of course, but it depends also on the direction of the wind. Well, if we move farther away, but the wind still blows in our direction, we'll still be affected. You see, we have so many factors around, factories around. Have I answered your question? Mr. MOK, from common sense, from our knowledge, the more farther away from us, the pollution source, the better. But that does not mean that that source will not affect us. Precisely recently, some scholars said that the pollution problem of Hong Kong is not just affected by the pollution sources in the PRD. In fact, farther away, there are other pollutant sources, namely particulates and ozone, that also affect us. In fact, pollution affects a wide area. So this is a very complicated matter. Paul, what about radiation? Is there any objective and clear indicator as to how far away should we be before we are safe? From what you said, apparently, there's no scientific formula to do calculation. When we review the past and look into the future, if we would like to improve ourselves in the region, how far should the improvement measures cover? It seems that with so many question marks. Christine? Well, now I understand more how I should answer this question. I can give you an example. It's also about an experience in the PRD. A few years ago, Guangdong asked this question: where should a petrochemical plant be built? Petrochemical plant. Now, for a certain period of time, this plant was placed near Nansha, and huge investment was put into that. Eventually, that plant was relocated farther away, also in PRD, but northwards, a bit northwards. Why was there such a decision eventually? It's because of the ambient environment there. Because farther north, the wind may every now and then blow the pollutants out into the ocean. Now in Guangdong, they're studying where to place their industries in relation to emission. So when we make such decisions, we can look to science to assist us where not to put what. Now, the Hong Kong and mainland experts are very clear that just in the triangle of the PRD, what the wind direction is in the atmosphere. In fact, both Hong Kong and Guangdong know that in this triangular area, high emission plants should not be built. That's number one. Number two, in Guangdong, they now have arrangements for highly polluted industries to move to other places. Of course, they're continuing to tighten their laws. In Hong Kong, we have to master these information. That's collaboration with Guangdong. Thirdly, in 2008, we had a new project in which a Hong Kong invested factory had a partnership program for emission reduction in Guangdong. We did explain that, and that project was postponed to 2015. I believe that not long from now, the administration will go to the Finance Committee to apply for funding. We've already passed the EA panel. To a certain extent, we should do all these. After all these are done, I believe the effects would be huge. Paul? According to the explanation of the Undersecretary and the supplementary information given by our colleagues, we have an agreement with Guangdong for emission reduction targets in 2015 and 2020. We try to collaborate with them as far as possible insofar as pollution is concerned. Should we go beyond Guangdong province? Or no matter how far we go is useless? What about Guangxi and Hunan? Should we also do something targeting them? Mr. Lai? Well, Mr. Chairman, pollution is very complicated. We list out 7 pollutants. Each has different impact on us. For NXB, now you can see the 7 pollutants: sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and carbon oxide. If we reduce the emission level, it would be very helpful, for example, in terms of vehicles. But for ozone and RSPs like PM10 and PM2.5, their regional impact are rather huge. In the past, some universities had done some assessment. Maybe 2/3 of our RSPs are from the PRD. So we can only resolve it by way of regional collaboration. And just now, the Bureau Director explained that just at the end of last month, we signed a new agreement with Guangdong on 4 major pollutants, including RSPs, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen dioxide. We set our emission reduction targets for 2015 and 2020 on the basis of 2010. On each side, there will be a reduction between 20 to 30%. If all these are done, it will be very helpful to our air quality. Mr. Chairman, each pollutant has different impacts on us, and its considerations are not the same. May I refer you to Appendix G. We always compare ourselves with cities in the United States, UK, and the EU. Well, here we have a rough history of these 3 countries or economies. Well, they did not change their pollutant level or the emission levels of all pollutants at the same time. We're still using the 1987 objectives because we had been too ambitious. Is that the case? We will try to do everything first before changing our objectives. Should we model on the United States, the EU, and the UK by adjusting our objectives every now and then?
Mr. Loh, perhaps this is a possible approach for the way forward. We don't have to revise all the AQOs at the same time. We can do it every now and then, one by one. Mr. Tse. Yeah, a few members asked about the U.S. litigation. This is a very short follow-up. I fail to understand why you use that litigation for the basis of revising PM 2.5. Is there any direct relationship between the outcome of that litigation in the U.S. with our own PM 2.5 standards? Mr. MOK. As I explained, we see that we have to introduce a standard for PM 2.5, and our own review hasn't got any recommendations. All along, we made reference to U.S. practice in formulating our own AQOs. Back then, the U.S. proposed a standard for PM 2.5, but at once it was challenged by a certain body in the U.S. And as a result, the standards could not be implemented. So we had to wait to see what should be the standards for PM 2.5 there. So we had to wait until the lawsuit is over, when the standards were recognized, before we can introduce a standard for PM 2.5. A short follow-up. It's a complicated issue, but please, a short follow-up. Well, at different times, there would be new moves or new standards in other countries. I'm not being harsh to the EPD, but you always have to make reference to other countries to wait for their lawsuit or this or that to settle. And I think that's the exact reason why you hadn't revised the AQOs in the past 25 years. So I hope you will not wait until everything is smooth and well before you act. So I think because this is something we would like to target at this morning. Mr. MOK. Well, Mr. MOK has listed out in Appendix C what they have done. No, not what they have done in the past, but the AQOs. I think what they have done and the AQOs are two different things. Yes. All right, please answer the Vice Chairman's question. Yes. Let me explain. We do have the need to make reference to other places' practice in setting our AQOs, because there are a lot of technical data and work to be considered and done. We cannot arbitrarily come up with our own data. In 1997, it's not that we only considered PM 2.5. In 1987, not many places had AQOs. The U.S. was among the first countries to introduce AQOs, so we established our own AQOs with reference to the U.S. And since 1987, we have been monitoring changes. There were two things in the U.S. First, the lawsuit involving PM 2.5, and the other thing can be seen in Appendix G. That is the introduction of standards for ozone. First, there was an old standard, and then it was decided that in places in the U.S. where the old standard was achieved, then a new standard or even tighter standard would be applicable. Back then, we were trying very hard to achieve the old standard for ozone. And we decided to introduce a standard for PM 2.5 as well. Now, if you may refer to Appendix G, Well, you only introduced standards for PM 2.5 in 2008 and the UK in 2007. So for the places, they only introduced standards for PM 2.5 quite late. And in 1997, we already noticed that trend and wanted to introduce a standard. But the US, as first mover, introduced PM 2.5 standards, but was challenged. All right. In the second row of 4 members, Kenneth, Alan, Yukman, and Hakan. Can we draw a line after that? And then Kenneth will take us to part 2. All right, Paul would like to be included. All right, then we'll ask Mr. Leung to lead us into the second part to be efficient. Kenneth. Thank you. I'd like to ask about Appendix B, the 2014 AQOs. The targets here, talk about those with an asterisk. You have an agreement with the Guangdong province to reduce emissions. I'd like to know whether the WOHQ levels here are consistent with your targets in that agreement. I know there are 2 target days, one in 2015, the other 2010. So for the 2014 AQOs, I'd like to know whether the standards are just as those in your agreement with the Guangdong province. And I'd like to know whether the timetable for 2014 AQOs is 2020. That is, you can only attain those targets in 2020. Mr. MOK. We've just come to an agreement with the Guangdong province, and we target, there are 4 pollutants, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, VOC, and also RSP. Well, by 2020, both sides should reduce and should reduce emissions in this 4 pollutants by double digit, using the emission levels in 2010 as the basis. And for the 2014 AQOs, we're talking about the concentration level of 7 pollutants in air. So the 2 are related, but not on the same basis. But of course, when the pollution has reduced, the concentration of these pollutants in air should also drop. But we do not use the air concentration. We do not use the concentration of these pollutants as our objectives. Regarding the new round of agreement with Guangdong province and new emission measures, we hope that by 2020 we'll be able to attain the 2014 AQOs. Kenneth, allow me to follow up. Your emission targets with the Guangdong province is expressed in terms of percentage. You want to attain a double-digit reduction. And for 2020, you have absolute standards to attain. When 2012, you think that the targets can, or the AQOs can only be attained in 2020. Of course, as said by Ms. Christine Loh, the Undersecretary, to a certain extent, to attain the WHO's AQGs, it is very, very difficult. But have you been too lax with yourselves? You are talking about 2020. In my view, the 2014 AQOs are not that stringent. What is the observation from the administration? Yes, I think Mr. Kenneth Leung's understanding of figures is correct. Take sulfur dioxide as an example. Our agreement with the Guangdong province is to use 2010 as the basis, and by 2015 we have to reduce it by 25%, and Guangdong has to reduce it by 16%. And for the new AQOs, we're talking about the concentration. There are 7 pollutants. They have different sources of formation and characteristics. So for ozone and RSP, if Guangdong works harder to reduce the emission by a greater extent, then our reduction here will also be bigger. But for sulfur dioxide, they are related to power plants and also vessels. So through new measures, we are gradually tightening the emission caps of power plants. And for vessels, we want to introduce new measures in the coming few years to gradually lower emission from vessels. So by 2020, we hope that in general we can attain the 2014 AQOs. But that doesn't mean that in between there will be no progress in the 8 years. As we roll out new measures, there will be gradual improvement, but the ultimate effect will be seen by 2020. Kenneth, I'd like to follow up on some final issues. You told us that the emission of sulfur dioxide is mainly due to roadside traffic. And for sulfur dioxide, the 10-minute concentration is set as 500 microgram. That is the WHO AQG level. That is quite stringent. But for the 24-hour standard, you've adopted the WHO interim target 1 of 125 microgram per cubic meter. How come you have this arrangement? For the emission of pollutants, please refer to page 10 of our slide. Test page 10. Page 10 is the air pollution emissions of Hong Kong in 2010. The EPD will compile a list of air pollution emission every year to gauge the level and source of emissions. This is important so that we know the sources of emissions and we can formulate targeted measures. The first column is sulfur dioxide. In 2010, half of the sulfur dioxide was related to power generation, 48% related to vessels or navigation. So we must formulate targeted measures to tackle this. And in Chapter 2, there were some observations by the Audit Commission, and to which we have responded. How come we cannot fully adopt WHO AQG for 24-hour SO2 concentration? Please refer to Appendix B of the report, which sets out 2014 AQOs with WHO AQGs. Those with asterisks are those that will be effective in 2014. There are 3 major pollutants, namely lead, carbon monoxide, and nitrogen dioxide. We have adopted a WHO AQG for these three pollutants. And for other things, we have to consider our local circumstances. We have some limits and regional effect, and therefore we cannot attain WHO AQG in one go. So we are being realistic. In 2006, when WHO did the review, there was a new option, or there is a new arrangement. While there are AQGs, WHO acknowledged that individual places have their restrictions and difficulties. So WHO promulgated 3 interim targets as well, hoping that different places can adopt the appropriate interim targets to suit their local circumstances. So we have gone for the interim targets first, but that is just a starting point. 5 years down the road, when we have another review, we will consider the air quality back then and the effect of our new measures, and to see whether there is any room for further improvement. I'm afraid Mr. Lai has not heard or answered my question. I am asking about sulfur dioxide. Well, for the 10-minute figure, we're told that we can attain WHO AQG, but for 24-hour sulfur dioxide, we can only attain WHO interim target 1, and that is 125 microgram per cubic meters. So is it rather illogical? I'd like to know what are the factors affecting the 10-minute and 24-hour average time measurements to the effect that we cannot attain WHO AQG for the 24-hour measurement. Ms. Christine LOH, may I try to put it this way? All right, we at target 1, well, we are looking at Appendix B, all right? For 24 hours, so too, the objective is interim target 1. Members are asking how we can move on to target 2 or T2. I think I can disclose here. Within the Bureau and within the department, there's been an argument whether we can go for T2. We've also discussed with local experts to attain T2, we have to require our vessels to switch fuel when they are berthed here. If we don't do this, we will never be able to attain target 2. So when we come back to LegCo, when we discuss what we are going to do in terms of legislation, please do appreciate if we cannot do that, 5 years down the road, another report by the Audit Commission will still give us a fail. Well, that's something for the future. Mr. Lai, can you now answer Mr. Kenneth Leung's question? Mr. Leung's question, well, if I try to repeat this question to see if I've got it right. Why for sulfur dioxide, for the 10-minute measurement, we can use the WHO AQG level, but not for 24-hour measurement? Now, because if there are places directly under the sources of pollution, and the level can surge when the wind brings the pollutant to that particular place. We have done a lot to reduce sulfur emission in Hong Kong. If you don't mind, please take a look at Appendix E. Quality of our fuel, vehicle fuel, we have done a lot to reduce sulfur. Sulfur is almost absent in our vehicle fuel, and industrial operations we've also greatly reduced sulfur emission. And our power plant is also another reason we have done something for desulfurization. So because of these measures, we're able to measure to attain the 10-minute WHO AQG level. Whereas for the 24-hour measurement, you may say the target 1 is easy to reach because it's rather lax. But let me tell you, even EU is using target 1. Just like us, they have done a lot. They have also worked on vessels, yet EU is still using target 1 as the objective. So we have to do a lot more on this basis in order to attain target 2.
Concerning AQG 20, I can tell you that it's extremely difficult. I have recently talked to local and overseas academics on this issue. If you are talking about the daily average of 20, that really looks quite impossible. Yes, a short question on ozone. Are you still on Appendix B? Yes. Because we need to tell all the relevant parties which page we are on. So because I'm still on the 2014 AQO's chairman. So with regard to ozone, now according to the EPD, it's mainly a regional problem. So I want to know the source of pollution as far as ozone is concerned. Why is it that we cannot do more to enable us to propose a more stringent objective? Allow me some more time to explain this issue. Yes, you have a lot of time, Mr. Mo. This is really a rather complex chemical issue. Ozone is seldom emitted from daily activities. Yes, I understand that the operation of photocopiers may emit a small amount of ozone, but then not large amounts. So how come we have large amounts of ozone emitted? Now, in the whole region, we may have VOC, nitrogen oxides, and they're trapped, and then under sunshine, ozone is formed. And when ozone is formed, it doesn't mean that that's all. So with VOC and nitrogen oxides, when they are blown, they are turned into ozone. And the ozone is in the is in the entire region, and then so VOC and nitrogen oxide are the sources of the ozone. And at the moment, we are working on two fronts. Firstly, we have to deal with our own emission problems. We need to reduce the emission of nitrogen oxides. Vehicles, power plants, in fact, we've done a lot of work. For power plants, for example, we've just had the third technical memorandum to further tighten the standards to be complied with by power plants. And then vehicle emissions, we are closely following EU standards. And then we are trying to replace the converters. And then we are also trying to have buses retrofitted with emission reduction devices. But then there's one very important thing, and that is the reduction in VOC emission. Now, with the support of this council, we're able to enact legislation to regulate aerosol spray, and also paint used in construction activities. We have sought to reduce their VOC content. So we've done these things in Hong Kong. And so we've worked on the main sources of emission. Of course, we'll try, continue to try to bring down VOC emissions. But this is a regional problem. It doesn't mean that we can rely on our own efforts alone to solve the problem. We also have to have cooperation with the mainland. Now, in fact, we've agreed with the mainland on reduction targets for 4 pollutants, and 2 of them are precisely VOC and nitrogen oxide. That's why I'm trying to say that we are already doing our best to try to cope with the problem. Thank you. I have no further questions on part 2. Yes, Mr. MOK, I thank you for your very detailed explanation, and if the opportunity arises, I think you should go to the panel to give such an explanation to panel members. Mr. Alan Leung, Chairman, in para 2.12 of the report, we are told that the Bureau and the EPD have carried out some studies on the 2014 AQOs. We're told that the quality of life will be improved, medical costs will be reduced, and labor productivity will be indirectly raised. And then we're told that more visitors will come to Hong Kong, there will be more foreign investments, and more talents will be attracted to stay and work in Hong Kong. And then may I refer to para 2.12a. The EPD has got a consultant to come up with some estimates. Now, according, if the 2014 AQOs are adopted, there will be fewer hospital admissions and fewer people will die. Now, it is said here that about 4,200 unnecessary hospital admissions and 7,400 statistical life years would be saved each year. And if you divide these by 7 million, then we are talking about an improved average life expectancy of around 1 month for the entire population. So you can see that there will be desirable effects if the 2014 objectives are adopted. Mr. Kenneth Leung has pointed out that your 2014 AQOs are on the more relaxed side. And then may I refer to Table 1. It says that if the 2014 AQOs are adopted, of course they are better than the 1987 AQOs. But may I refer you to the last line, the so-called interim target. It is said here, effects on mortality and on hospital emergency admissions for total respiratory and chronic obstructive pulmonary diseases consistently demonstrated. In fact, that's the last column I'm referring to. So in other words, even if the 2014 AQOs are adopted, people will continue to die, so to speak. And concerning para 2.32c, the Director of Audit recommends that the Secretary and the Director should set time targets with milestones for achieving the AQOs. Chairman, in fact, you asked a similar question earlier on. You referred to the Secretary's speaking notes. He said there would be a review once every 5 years. That's para 2, right? And the Secretary and the Undersecretary kept reminding us that the amendment bill would be tabled in LegCo next year. But then, how many 5 years are there in one's life? Now, Chairman, I understand that you've asked this question, but I haven't heard a reply. At least I haven't heard a reply that is to our satisfaction. So these measures are economically effective. There will be fewer hospital admissions. There will be fewer premature deaths. Then, is it right for the administration not to answer the chairman's question because, according to them, there are also factors beyond our control? Now, because we do have expectations concerning the Secretary and the Undersecretary. What are the difficulties? Why can't you adopt even higher standards for the 2014 AQOs? Undersecretary, I think my reply can be divided into 2 parts. The first part has already been explained. I'm talking about the ambient air region. So I'm not saying that as there are pollutants coming from the mainland, that's why there is nothing we can do. I've never said that. Please do not get the impression that I'm trying to suggest this. And regional cooperation will help solve this problem. And then second, what we can do in Hong Kong. Now, Mr. Alan Leung referred to public health. So what can we do to reduce health hazards or risks? Now, you know, we all have a nose, and when we breathe in, what is the most important is the exposure, and that's why roadside air pollution and emission from marine vessels are our top priorities, because such emissions affect Hong Kong people's health most. So if you need to prescribe the right medicine for the disease, then we need to take appropriate action. We work with the medical schools of the 2 universities, and we are able to calculate by how much the risk can be reduced. And we will be providing such data to members in future. And previously, in Hong Kong, we did not carry out too many studies on the impact of air pollution on long-term health. In the US, they have carried out many such studies. In Asia, we don't have so many such studies. But I can remember the 2 medical schools in our 2 universities have carried out some studies, and over 10 years ago, as far as I can remember, the government also carried out a study. But it seems that the administration hasn't continued with such studies. But then, as we're talking about tracing the long-term impact of air pollution on public health, we have to look at the changes in the health conditions of those concerned. So we're talking about working on a long-term basis. So we need the resources, we need the determination, of course. So we need to ask experts what we can do in the short term and what we can do in the medium term and in the long term. And I hope that in the near future, I can give members some more details. Alan, I of course welcome such new developments. But can I ask a question that is more realistic now, because the chairman keeps reminding the witnesses that we have to prepare our report. Now, the objectives were formulated in 1987, 25 years ago, but then we've never been able to meet these objectives. And now you are coming up with the 2014 AQOs, which represent higher standards, and we are only over a year from 2014. So how can you convince us that the objectives, the new objectives, can be met? Christine, now I will answer, and then Mr. Mok can supplement. This is also a question that I am asking myself, and I believe in future when we come to LegCo, you will not let us off so lightly. And every time when we ask LegCo for funding, you will definitely ask us the extent of reduction of pollution, and to what extent the reduction can help us achieve the new objectives. And then I believe you will also ask this question, and that is because the results won't be seen till a few years down the road. So we will ask me whether there is a feedback mechanism in the interim. Say, for example, what if the outcome is not as expected? Will the measures be revised? I am sure you will require us to provide such information. You will not be letting us off very lightly. Now, Christine, so you do have meetings with your counterparts in the Pearl River Delta region, and you said that in fact the problem was related to the entire PRD region, the ambient air region. Now, and then you've told us that in the Pearl River Delta region, improvements have been made. So, can you still say that the situation is quite beyond your control? So now they have adopted a lot of measures to reduce emission. The PRD is doing its part. We are doing our part. And so I think you should be able to answer Mr. Eleanor's question. But you still haven't answer the question. That's why we are trying to ask you the same question in different ways, approaching the issue from different angles. We'll not give up until we've got a reply from you. So 2014 is really around the corner. And the 1987 objectives have not yet been met. So how can we be confident that the 2014 objectives are realistic and can be met? Chairman, now of course today I can't tell you everything that we're going to do because certain measures may require legislation or funding. If we can do all those things, then by 2015, 2020, we should be able to achieve those targets in the table. Now, you know, the government's stance is to launch a policy once it is once the consideration has become mature. So, because we were talking about very profound economic and health implications here. Chairman, when we lay down AQOs, we want to see improvements. We haven't met the ultimate objectives of the WHO yet. So we are not saying that the objectives can be met today. The 2014 objectives, in fact, are challenging to us. But then if we can introduce the 22 measures in the appendix, and if we can step up cooperation with the Pearl River Delta region, and in fact the Secretary has already signed an agreement with the Guangdong authorities concerning reduction targets for 2015 and 2020. So with all these measures in place, we are confident that we'll be able to meet the 2014 objectives. And then may I refer to para 2.15. I want to point out that although at the moment we're not able to fully meet the objectives, the situation has greatly improved. Now, with the exception of ozone, the concentrations of major pollutants have been reduced. But of course, for ozone, it's a regional problem, and NO2 that's caused by vehicular traffic. And in fact, we have been seeking funding from LegCo to reduce vehicular emission. And with your support, we've got funding for the for remote testing. And this is an important measure to test emissions from petrol vehicles and diesel vehicles. And then for franchise buses, we are also trying to carry out alteration works to reduce nitrogen oxide emissions. So for the 2014 objectives, we hope that they can be met or achieved by 2020. Alan. Now, if we look at 2.14, 5.2, 5.3, 2.11, 2.19, 2.24, 2.29, you can see that the 1987 objectives have never been achieved. And the progress has not been too significant. So I hope that the witnesses, and I want to manage the witnesses' expectations. I believe the conclusions of the PAC will inevitably be harsh, but then such harsh conclusions may help the administration get more resources. And when we come to Chapter 2, we will discuss with the permanent secretary measures to bring down roadside air pollution. So that will be these will be dealt with under Chapter 2. But then we've got a letter, R59/1/Gen 1, Chairman. It's a reply from the EPD, and we can see that concerning NO2, we are inferior to Shanghai, not to mention Singapore.
Well, on page 1 of the letter, you can see the table. No matter what, in terms of effectiveness, if we are to assess our performance, Director, I understand that your job is not easy. But when we mention CAP 311, you're the authority. So you have to understand that according to the air quality, the air control ordinance, you have to, when practicable and as soon as possible, attain the AQOs. And she should also maintain the air quality at those levels. Now, before we write our report, the Secretary and the Director, as the controlling officers, should give us the details of the measures, and each measure should tell us by how much the concentration level of each of the pollutants should be reduced. That is, after we heard severe criticisms against the administration, we would like to do something, and this is this is my request. Well, this is just a humble request. Yes, the chairman said that this is a humble request. So our report would like to be forward-looking, and I would not like to waste the effort of our secretariat. We now have a new bureau director and a new undersecretary. I hope that they can do something to benefit the people of Hong Kong such that each of us will enjoy one more month of life. So please seriously consider our suggestions. Secretary? Mr. Leong, I agree with you. In our next round of reporting, we'll be able to give you more details. Why am I saying so? For the regional situation, last time when we met with the provincial governor of Guangdong, both sides had the sincerity to improve the situation, and we're optimistic in that, and we have set pledges for the future, and I do have confidence in attaining those targets. Well, just time we mentioned the CE and the working group under the chairmanship of the CS. They, together with the Environment Bureau, will handle the matter. So this is a positive way of going about it. So we're optimistic about the future. Well, the CE said that in terms of people's livelihood, nothing is trivial. So environment is important. Now, Mr. Leung asked for more information. Do give us this information. Alan, any more? No? Yukman? Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask 2 follow-up questions. We have to finish at 12:45. And then we have Hakan and Paul as well. Well, very simple. Originally, I had a few questions. I'll pick 2 from those. Well, colleagues did not quite mention those issues. From 2000 to 2005, the government launched a number of policies to address air quality. For example, WKCD, Tama site, tunnels, XRL, West Rail, and so forth. For all these years, or in the past few years, the policy address did not report on the latest situation, and there was no proposal for adjusting the AQOs. So the 2 of you here, in the new government, will you assess whether we need to modify the AQOs which affect our air quality, and have you reviewed the AQOs of each district? If you have not done so, then the past Environment and Works Bureau, I really don't know what they had done. At present, at that time, Environment and Works were put under one bureau. Now, they're segregated. On the one hand, we would like to improve air quality. On the other hand, the administration is doing something in opposition, which would affect your work. So for this new Environment Bureau, have you carried out any assessment, studies? Have you tried to find solutions? Have you tried to coordinate with the other bureaus and departments and try to cooperate with them? Secretary? Now, we have set objectives for 2015 and 2020. That is, by 2020, we should be able to attain the AQOs. And in this process, we've actually considered the infrastructure projects. If we look ahead, there will be more infrastructure projects. And before any legislation, they would, out of their own initiatives, follow the new AQOs. So overall speaking, we did cover the infrastructure projects. Well, Mr. Chairman, I understand that he did not want to answer my questions directly. That is, to what extent the infrastructure projects would affect air quality. And in future, when they try to improve air quality, they will take into consideration the impacts of the infrastructure projects. But then, to facilitate our recording, would you please give me a concrete answer? Well, Secretary, maybe you can repeat paragraph 11 of your speaking notes. Well, that's a good question. We want an answer. Mr. Chen Hak can also ask you the same question. Is it paragraph 11? Well, Secretary and then Undersecretary. Or would the Undersecretary like to answer first? Well, this is a question that can be answered. Now, let me cite an example of concern. That's an infrastructure project. That's the 3rd runway. At present, is under an EIA, I believe. When compared with previous infrastructure projects, many people and many NGOs are monitoring this particular project. Now, this is an AA project. When this project was proposed, many sectors of the community including the administration, participated in the progress. Ms. Wong was responsible for vetting. She has done 2 rounds of work already. We all know that if we are to have the 3rd runway, whether or not the EIA is passed is very important. And then we have to address air pollution. Well, let me make some assumptions. Now, if the EIA is not endorsed, what comes next? The AA has to study possible emission reduction measures to help itself get this EIA endorsed. So does that mean that throughout the whole of Hong Kong, there will be emission reduction measures? So that's the path ahead. Mr. Paul Chan, the other secretary, has some worries. Hong Kong is different from other places. We have the Air Pollution Control Ordinance, which is directly connected with the EIA ordinance. Elsewhere in the world, it's not like that. If you do not actively reduce emission, you cannot get your EIA endorsed. So the question is, can I build anything? So in future, it's not just within the administration there will be arguments. In fact, in future, this will be a territory-wide discussion. That is, where should we strike a balance between environmental protection and development? Now, in Hong Kong, with so many development projects at the moment, where is the saturation point? For the time being, we ourselves don't yet have a conclusion, but this will be an important discussion in Hong Kong. Well, thank you very much for throwing out this question to us. That is, where is the balancing point? Mr. Wong Yong-man, well, I'd like to follow up on Ms. Christine Loh's remarks. For those studies and work of the AA, no matter how numerous they are, if the EIA report cannot be endorsed, I mean in terms of environmental protection, if the whole of Hong Kong then has to match the effort, then I'd like her to clarify one point. Is it that Hong Kong will die without a 3rd runway? We have to clarify that first. It's just like what I said before. The Hong Kong government is one body, but it seems that different bureaus and departments are doing something that offset one another's effort. Now, who should sacrifice what? This is an essential question to ask. So now you give me the impression that will be sacrificed in order to make way for the 3rd runway. So I think we have to be very careful about this. Well, I think your example is very good, the 3rd runway. So in what way should we strike a balance between the 3rd runway and the EIA report? But then the balance can be tilted. Then it will be an imbalance. For me, the government as a whole, the major direction is sustainable development. Should you not make that the most important direction? Well, Paul Chan, don't try to upset my work. Will you tell him that? Well, I'm a bit worried about Christine Loh's answer just now. If the AA cannot, through its work, convince us that there should be a 3rd runway, then what you said just now is that the whole of Hong Kong would have to join to reduce emission. That's a problem in this. Well, Undersecretary, I believe you're sincere in answering our questions. Now, you raise a broad issue, but we have to resolve this problem. For report number 59. So Yok Man was asking a macro question. Sorry, let me finish. How can this macro issue be related to report number 59? You have brought out this balance issue between environmental protection and development. Now, I don't want to start a debate here, because that's not the terms of reference of this committee. So please don't continue with that discussion. Please answer Yukman's question. In this report is mentioned, and the Secretary also mentioned in paragraph 11 of his introductory remarks, something about the objectives. So please go back to the objectives. Well, just now I was trying to give you an example. At present, there's no problem with the AA's EIA. I just want to stimulate, I just want to offer a stimulating example to answer Mr. Wong Yok Man's question so that you know where the problem lies. Well, Paul, you need not worry. After Yok Man will have Hakkan, and then it's your turn. It doesn't matter, you can defer your questions till the next session. Well, just one more question. The consultancy commissioned by the EPD would assess the economic assessment. That's in paragraph 2.21. In early 2012, $627 million were injected into solving the problem, amounting to 0.03% of our GDP. Have you asked the government or the consultancy, when compared with the developed jurisdictions, is this level high or low? If it is on the low side, will the Bureau apply to the CE for more funding? Permanent Secretary? Well, yes, let me briefly say that in the audit report, it said that the resources were placed in incentive schemes run by the EPD. But in terms of pollution reduction, there are other sources of government funding. It's not to reduce revenue. There's a series of measures. For example, exemption for first registration tax for green vehicles. The fuel tax was also reduced to 0 for Euro 5 diesel. From 2010 to 2011, by eliminating that fuel tax, government revenue up to $2 billion were involved. Well, I understand your answer. So for this part, you are unable to come up with some calculation. I gave you 0.03% of our GDP. That's definitely on the low side. But you told us that in order to reduce air pollution, government revenue had been reduced. Well, go back and give us some more figures. Hakkan first. Please be brief. Chairman, I'd also like to follow up on Mr. Alan Leung's 2014 objectives set out in Appendix B. Well, sometimes they adopt the WHO 1 standard, sometimes WHO 2 standard, sometimes the ultimate standard. To me, they're jumping from one standard to another, sometimes higher, sometimes lower, and actually there's an ultimate threshold. Well, the Secretary mentioned the regional factor. From what I heard, I got the feeling that the administration itself is worried that it would not be able to attain the objectives. If you ask a child to sit for an examination, you will definitely set a higher standard for it, such that it will pass at a higher standard. But why is it that for the 2014 objectives, we try to lower the standards such that we could attain them? And previously, you set the 1987 objectives at a very low level. You could not even attain that. So, how are you sure that you attain the WHO Target 1 and WHO Target 2, blah, blah, blah? But of course, we're told that if all the 22 measures in Appendix C are done, then the problem can be solved. But some of those measures are controversial. For example, restructuring of the bus routes, that is rationalization of the bus routes, green roofs, vertical greening, etc., etc. Last time when the Secretary answered my question, he failed to convince me that these measures would be able to address the problem. Who will answer this? Well, to answer that question, if we look at other jurisdictions, if they refer to the WHO's AQGs, they would do the same as we. This is to act in accordance with the geographical conditions of each jurisdiction, and this is something normal. Well, let me say that this is nothing easy, but we'll try to meet the difficulties and work as hard as possible. We'll try our very best. And in this process, we'll always review the results. So we're optimistic. We've reinforced the coordination among different bureaus and departments. So my simple question is that we'll be able to improve our air quality.
Hakan, a short follow-up. If you're so confident, why can't you set a higher standard for all the pollutants, in particular PM 2.5, which is our greatest concern? The standard is just set at target 1. Secretary, well, I think the concentration is subject to both local and regional factors. I think setting the concentration, setting objective at target 1 is a reasonable move now. Secretary, may I suggest that you write us a paper to explain to us why there are different targets, T1, T2, and T3, so that it can facilitate our report writing. Hakan, one more simple question. Page, what paragraph? Paragraph 2.19. It says here that, well, indeed, the UK has got 3 measures for emission reduction and also a cap for emission from power plants. I'd like to know whether we have done the same and what is our emission limits. Mr. MOK, please give a succinct answer. All right. For power plants, really set the emission limits. We've just got the approval of LegCo to promulgate our 3rd technical memorandum. In addition to setting emission limits, we continue to tighten the limits, which are subject to a review every 2 years. All right, you have 3 minutes, Porter. Mr. Porter. Mr. Nan Leung asked a question in relation to the 2014 AQOs, and that 4,200 unnecessary hospital admissions can be saved, and then we can also enjoy 1 more month of life expectancy if the targets are attained. Well, we are among the top in the world in terms of life expectancy, and yet our air quality is so bad. Doesn't it seem contradictory, or it will cause us to ask what has happened with regard to this inconsistency? Mr. MOK, first, life expectancy is not just affected by air quality. Quality of healthcare services is another factor. Nevertheless, there is room for our air quality to be improved. So, it's exactly because of this that we have the 2014 AQOs, and we've already implemented a number of measures to attain these objectives. And that is not all. We have a mechanism of regular review to see whether our measures are effective, and second, whether there is room to further tighten our objectives, because our objective is, after all, to attain the WHO AQGs. Mr. Porter, speaker is off mic. Christine, well, as pointed out by our expert in the report, we have a population of 7 million. If we can attain the 2014 AQOs, we can all live longer for at least a month. So you can see exactly where the problem lies. Our life expectancy is so long because the government or the community as a whole has done a lot. But if our air quality is even better, life expectancy can even be longer. And when you are alive, you want to be healthy. So a longer average life expectancy is one thing. To stay healthy while you're alive is another thing. So we would like to continue to cut emissions. It may sound just common sense, but I query whether we've been too cautious in setting and attaining our AQOs. Take a look at Gen 1, that letter. If we look at the measurement of nitrogen dioxide, well, in New York, it's not measured in all monitoring stations. What is most outrageous, they do not measure it at all at Manhattan, which is the most busy city. So in Hong Kong, we take readings at all monitoring stations. We do not skip Causeway Bay, which is the busiest in town. So we might be making trouble for ourselves. On the one hand, we are sticking too hard to the objectives, and we don't want to revise it. So aren't we creating problems for ourselves? Since there are so many different standards in the world, should we adopt a more pragmatic approach to see what will happen if we follow closely WHO AQGs, and what will happen if we don't? Should we have a separate study? Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Jie, for your question. I think our ultimate goal is to have a rather comfortable environment and to enjoy health while we are living. And improving our air quality will improve our roadside and living environment. I appreciate what you said, Mr. Jie. People in New York are not so meticulous in measuring the pollutants. And why is it that in Hong Kong we have so much difficulties in attaining the targets? I think our colleagues have been very conscientious in providing information to the public for the information. For instance, we can further enhance our information system of API. So in terms of notification, I think there is room for us to improve our system. For instance, local academics can consider consolidating our local health data and local air pollution data that will assist members to understand the relationship between API or air quality and our health. Paul, a very quick follow-up. Yes, our standards for measuring and for reporting, I think we should explain more to the public. We should be more transparent in our transparency so that people will not say that we have revised our AQs for a long time, yet we have not attained them. Of course, it's problematic not to have revised our AQOs, but at least we can shed some light in the current situation. To be fair, people will not keep saying that the AQs have not been revised and have not been attained for a long time. Under Secretary, you're correct, Mr. Jie. We certainly could do better. And the government doesn't have to be too evasive. We can be more open in giving information. The measuring of air pollution is by means of our monitoring stations and data from colleagues, and also I believe the data we disclose to the public are among the top of the world in terms of quality. Now, people query how come our measures have failed to attain the AQOs, but in terms of measuring and dissemination of information, we've done an excellent job. And as for world-class cities or cities we commonly compare ourselves to, they are not as meticulous as us. And Mr. Chen said that we've done so much, and perhaps the victim of our own hard work. It's true that we should explain better to the public, but a fact is a fact. When we are in Causeway Bay, our face will be black with emissions. So no matter how you disseminate the information, the facts are there. Mr. Zhe, do you have further questions? Well, because time constraint, I will end here. All right, Kenneth, can you please, is there any summary you'd like to draw? And then, because at the next meeting, we'll move on to another part. Thank you, Chairman. To conclude our hearing this morning, there are three things. First, how come there haven't been any revision to our 1987 AQOs? My impression is that the former terms of government might have been too passive in this regard, and there's room for improvement. Second, the question of not attaining the AQOs in terms of nitrogen dioxide and ozone, well, that may be related to emissions from our neighborhood cities. But I also agree with our chairman that the factories in the PRD are subject to even stricter emission control than Hong Kong, and many factories have also moved further west. And the 2014 AQOs, as commented by a number of members, can we have we have tighter objectives for the pollutants, so that we can have higher standards to attain. Chairman, as you said, we have had a very thorough discussion on Part 2. We are very grateful to the Bureau and Department. For Part 3, it will be done at 9 a.m. next Tuesday. We'll focus on Part 3, and therefore, that is the air pollution index notification system, and then Part 4, the performance reporting. Now, if the discussion takes shorter than 2.5 hours as planned, will it be against our ROP if we start the discussion of another part? Well, next Tuesday, the Secretary has to have an Executive Council meeting, and that is part of his duties. So the Undersecretary will be here. We've got a timetable for discussing another report. So if we complete earlier than scheduled, then we can call it a day earlier. Let's not pressurize ourselves and also the administration, because they have to come prepared. To be fair, while we want to be efficient, we have to consider our established procedures. We have to respect your procedures. Thank you very much, Secretary and the Secretary and your team. See you next Tuesday. Thank you.